So, hello everyone, my name is Travis. I'm here interviewing my old law and public safety teacher, Mr. McCarthy, who is also an ex-police officer from Passaic County.
Parsippany,
My
Morris
bad.
County.
So, first question, what were you doing at my age and where were you?
I was pretty much like every teenager, kind of unsure of myself in high school, just graduating. And I was able to become a civilian dispatcher for a police department right out of high school.
Did you have any fellow family members in law enforcement?
My brother was a police officer at the time, and ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to be a police officer. I guess my brother kind of helped that along too.
Did you ever feel lost or you were unsure of what the future held for you?
Oh yeah, I think that's common to find, not to be sure of yourself, not to know what the future's going to bring. What if this happens, or what if that happens, or am I going to have enough money, or should I buy the new car or not? So it's always unsettling like that.
Are you going to get fired from your job?
Am I going to get fired from my job? Things like that. Yeah, that's one of those.
Did you always know you wanted to be a police officer?
Yeah, from the time I was a little kid. I think my brother influenced that also too when he became a police officer. So I think he had a big impact on that because my father raised us to get a good job with benefits. So being a police officer, a firefighter, something like that, and I always liked being a police officer.
Did you see it more as an expectation or something you solely wanted to do?
Something I more wanted to do than an expectation. I don't think there was any expectation to me to do that, just to get a good job with benefits.
Mm-hmm. When did you know that you were making an impact in your field or on others?
It's kind of hard to say because every day was different, and you never know really how you impact somebody in that job. I mean, some days you had really good days, and some days you had bad days. And I don't mean personally, but I mean, the people that you dealt with that day could have been a really good day, or could have been a really bad day for them. So impacting on a daily basis was tough. There was one call that I know I had talked to a teenage boy out of committing suicide, and about 10 years later he came back and introduced himself to me again, because I don't remember who he was, and introduced me to his wife and his new child. So that I knew I impacted somebody's life at one point.
That's nice. What was the hardest part about your job?
Probably dealing with death notifications. A lot of fatal accidents, have to go and knock on a door and telling the parents that their son or daughter wasn't coming home, that they were involved in a car accident and were killed.
Mm-hmm. Were there ever times that you felt like you wanted to give up, you didn't want to be a cop anymore?
Yeah, actually at one point when I first started, I actually had left the police department for 8 months. I had just gotten married, and my wife wasn't happy with me being a police officer. She was always afraid that I wasn't going to come home, but I missed it. I really liked it, so I went back and we worked it out, and we're still married.
What got you out of bed in the morning? What drove you to go out there, put on the gun, and help people?
I think I probably had a strong commitment to the community. My father was handicapped when I was young, and he was taken care of by the volunteer ambulance squad in town. So when I had the opportunity, I joined the volunteer ambulance squad as a junior squad member, and I became a senior member. And I think that kind of spurred me along to getting to that mode to help people, being a community member and trying to, give back for what they had given my family.
So as in joining the first aid squad, did you have anything else to add to your resume before you went to be a cop?
No, I had a high school diploma, and I became a civilian dispatcher right out of high school. I graduated in June, became a dispatcher in July, and I took the police test, and I was lucky enough to get hired within 3 years, I guess.
What was one of the saddest parts of your job? Or does that go hand in hand with the hardest?
Probably goes hand in hand with the hardest. I mean, sometimes that you just saw overwhelming sorrow. It was a car accident one night that I was at, and I wasn't working, and I was on a volunteer ambulance squad, and it was right down the street from my girlfriend's house, who became my wife, and she was on the ambulance squad too. And we both went to the call, and there were 3 young people in a car that were killed in a fatal accident that basically should never happened. But one of the people in the car was a brother of one of my friends from school. I've grown up, I've known their whole family my entire life. They're friends of my family. And he came by and says, "Is there anybody we know?" And I'm like, yeah, just go home and see your parents. And then at that point, he knew that there was something wrong there. And that was probably one of the saddest days I had.
With all the death and grief that comes with being a police officer, how do you learn to cope with it?
It's very difficult. A lot of police officers can't. A lot of them become alcoholics. A lot of them get depressed over it. But then you have other people that use gallows humor, what they call it. We have to make light of what other people see as horrific or whatever, and we kind of build up an immunity, a shield to it, I guess, and it kind of messes you up a little bit. But
like, it doesn't faze you anymore?
To an extent, no. You kind of get numb to it. Yeah, to an extent, no. You just kind of get numb to it. It's just like, you're going out there, and it's like, it might be a fatal accident. It's okay, it's a fatal accident. Just deal with it and move on.
Looking on the brighter side of things, what was one of the best parts of your job?
One of the best parts of jobs, I delivered 4 babies while I was working. I had the opportunity to, see a new life come into the world. I assisted with that on, emergency calls. They call them first aid calls, and so I was able to deal with that. So that was kind of interesting.
Did it ever get messy?
Delivering babies? Yeah, it's always messy.
What made you feel like you had a good day at work?
Coming home and going to sleep. Good day at work was basically, I don't want to use the term routine, but a non-violent day, a non-stressful day, where some days it was just kind of like, okay, I'm out here for 10 hours. Nothing really bad happened. You went to your normal calls, but that was kind of a good day at work. And sometimes, funny things happened too while you were working, so you could laugh at things.
What makes a discouraging day at work, not wanting to go back again?
I think you see the inhumanity in people, that people can be cruel to one another beyond extent that you didn't think anybody could do that. I mean, we hear about war and like Hitler, the Holocaust. I mean, those are horrific acts. But when you see it on, a basis where some father, can beat his child with a coat hanger and leave welts on him, and to see, a husband and wife in domestic violence, and they wind up, stabbing each other. That's really discouraging.
How do you not deal with it, but go back out there and do it again?
You just gotta basically, go back to it and see what you can do to straighten it out, because there's other calls you go back there and you could actually sit down and talk to people, talk some sense into them, and it works out, to a better way. Like I said, the kid I talked out of committing suicide, that was a really good day, and I think that was like the highlight of my career.
Is it ever discouraging when you have to go back to the same offender over and over again, or have you never had to deal with that?
No, when I first started, we didn't have domestic violence. There was nothing in the law that really could cover it, because a lot of it was the wife said, well, he did this or she did that, so there was nothing you'd do. So a lot of times you knew, like a Friday night, the husband would go out and drink his paycheck and come home and start yelling at the wife, throwing things, not really hitting her, but like mentally abusing her. So you just say, if you got someplace to stay, take him to a local hotel. If you had family in town, you drop him off at his house. So the next Friday night you do the same thing. But Saturday morning he brought her flowers, he apologized, and everything would be good for a week, and then Friday night it'd start all over again. There was numerous frequent flyers that we had.
What would you say would be one of your funniest stories as a police officer?
Funniest stories. I got to think about that one. There were so many good things that happened to us. the one night there was 4 of us assigned in one car working a special detail, and it was a old Ford Bronco, one of the old 4-wheel drive vehicles. And I was in the back seat with another guy, and there was 2 guys up front. One of them was my good friend driving the car, and he decided we were going off-roading up into the special detail.
Was this Rocco?
Yes. And he decided to take a path, and the next thing you know, the car just like came to an abrupt stop. He had parked us over a culvert where only the front bumper and the back bumper were hanging on to this car that kept us up about 12 feet suspended in the air. And it was kind of like, don't anybody move, this car could shift and we could all die. Well, we were close enough to the side, so we jumped out, and he says, what do we do now? I said, what do you mean, we? It was before the days of cell phones. He had to walk about a half mile back through the woods, down into a local shopping center, use a payphone, and call a local wrecker. It took 2 wreckers to get this car off this culvert without damaging it, without headquarters finding out, and we had to pay the wrecker out of pocket. Kind of funny when you think about it at the end, though.
What are your final words for people trying to figure out what they want to do with their life?
A lot of people can't figure out what they want to do with their life. They wander, or they bounce from job to job. They don't know. They want to do this or do that, and they're not happy in what they do. And there's an old saying that if you like your job, you'll never work a day in your life. I've been fortunate. I've had 2 jobs where I haven't had to put in a day's work yet. It seems odd to say that because, you're entrusted with a gun and people, and I was a supervisor and responsible for other people, but I never felt that I was really working. It was fun to go to my job. So when you're looking to do something you're going to enjoy, something that you can put food on a table, you can make a decent amount of money at, but still have fun and enjoy your job. If your job ever gets to the point where you hate it and you don't want to go there anymore, every once in a while that's fine, but if it's every day, then find another job.
Would you say that being a police officer back in your day has significantly changed in the current day status?
Oh, absolutely. Most of the time, we didn't have video cameras and everything. Towards the end of my career, we started getting cameras in the car, but we didn't have the body mics or body cams. So that was different. And people had more respect for police back in like the 80s, in the early 90s. This whole culture now has changed where everybody's, fighting against everybody else, and, the police are the enemy of everybody, and cops aren't. They're just the guy next door. I mean, we put our pants on the same way as everybody else does, one leg at a time, but the culture has totally changed that, people, if you saw in New York throwing buckets of water over cops' heads and doing it, that would have never happened back then. People had more respect for a police officer. I mean, every once in a while you get people that got nasty with you. For the most part, though, you didn't have those problems.
What do you think about, not per se dirty cops, but cops that make their arrests based on race or others?
You're always going to have that in a society. There's going to be no indiscriminate, or I should say discrimination. You're never going to erase that. There's always going to be somebody that has some hatred towards one group of people or another, but you try to weed those people out in a selection process. And I was happy to say that most of the police officers I work with, 99% of them, they weren't racist. And if they were, they never showed it. They treated everybody equally. They did what they had to do. We never went out looking for African Americans or Hispanics or, people of a different religion, whatever. We just went out and did our job. And I think that was the nice thing about where I worked, that, everybody kind of got along and just went to it. I mean, if you do have a cop that's a racist and that's all you see him do is going out there getting involved in fights with, minority groups, then he should not be a cop anymore.
Well, that was the last of my questions. Do you have any more funny stories?
Any more funny stories? Again, there's so many. I'm trying to think. It's hard. You put me on a spot now. I've got to go back and think.
Well, you've told me so many throughout
I know.
the years.
That's what I'm saying. There's so many funny stories that are out there. Trying to think. I'm stuck right now.
What about the guy who was locked up in the cell and he took all his clothes off and went on his head?
I don't know if you want to put that on tape for your class. What Travis is alluding to, we had a gentleman who actually tried to abduct a schoolgirl off the street corner, but just so happens her mother happened to be there. She stayed that day. She normally never does, but for whatever reason, the mother stayed, and this guy pulled up in a van and tried to take the girl right off the street corner with other kids standing there before the school bus came, and a mother, obviously tried to stop it and started yelling, and there was some construction workers working across the street, and they came out and grabbed the guy and held us till the police got there. And then when this guy got in there, he was, absolutely crazy. Come to find out, he was a mental patient from the state of Virginia who shouldn't have been in New Jersey. He kind of escaped. They left the door open. And when we locked him in our cell, he immediately proceeded to strip down completely naked, stand on his head, and started to masturbate on himself. Yes, that was a comedy story.
Well, on that note, I would like to conduct this interview. Thank you for your time, Mr. McCarthy.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure.